Hello, good evening, and good day, everybody, and welcome back to the Ask Abhijit show. I hope everyone's doing great. Today we're going to discuss history. I'm going to take questions that you all have asked in the live in the comments. So I'm going to take a bunch of those. I've chosen a number of questions. I'll answer as many of these as possible, and if there is still time, I will take some questions from the live chat after that. So let's see who all is there on the live chat with us. I can see Dakshu, I can see Nikesh Dahal, Shri Hari Nair, Kapish Agarwal, Netizen Random Shots, Vladimir Putin, Ojaswit Kumar, Kenel, Geopolitical Dubey from Indore, Ayush Singh, Namaste, Rational Thinker, Vikash PJ, Pratik Vorasomi Jain, Hensi Penguin, Namaskaram, Rayyan, Freedom from Outcome from Canada. Good morning, sir. Chat DSP, Imatistic, Random Shots, Latangi Suresh, Netizen, Vikash PJ, Vladimir Putin, Archan, Dutch Rational Thinker, Nikhil, Bhargavi, Nikesh Dahal, Rudra Narayan, geopolitical debate again. Bruce Wayne is here. So Sahil Khalia, Moba Manis, Om Bekerikar, hello. Richard is here. Nick Hill, Ashwani, Tushar Kasana, Kenel, Lathangi Suresh, Sagar, Gare, Dhruv Duria, Anna Hita, salutations. Ayush Yadav, Shrihari Nair, Ayush, once again, Rahul G, Harshal Patel, Suraj S, Satellite, Seneca, Dhruv Sharma, Shiv Brody Anirudh, Harshal Patel, and everyone else, Saint Crocodile, Saint Crocodile, and Shreyas Mitra from Moscow. Hello, hello. Uh, and everyone else. All right, people, so good to have you all. Thank you so much for being on this live stream. And now let's get going with as many questions as we can take today. All right, so let's do that. What's the first question that we have for today? One second, let me find the questions. Here we are. Here we are. Rahul Dunake asks a question that seems to be a question about science, but how about we turn that into a history question? We can always do that, can't we? So the question is: do black holes lose mass in the form of Hawking radiation? Can the loss of mass trigger the black hole to become a neutron star after its mass becomes less than 1.4 solar masses? The Chandrasekhar limit. So let's talk about the Chandrasekhar limit. Who was Chandrasekhar? Why is it called the Chandrasekhar limit? Who is it named after? This physics phenomenon, or physics, this law of nature, right? Chandrasekhar. So it's named after Subramaniam Chandrasekhar. Subramaniam Chandrasekhar was the first ever astrophysicist to win a Nobel Prize in physics. Not just the first first ever Indian astrophysicist, but the first astrophysicist from any country to win a Nobel Prize. And it's named after him. And Chandrasekhar was born in, he was born in Lahore, I think, in the 1920s or something, or 1910s. I don't remember which exact year it was. It was during the British occupation of India. And he was from a Tamil Brahmin family. And at the age of 15, he wrote a physics paper. And by the age of 19, he was on his way to London on an Indian government scholarship. He was on his way to Cambridge, and that's where and on the journey to Cambridge on the ship voyage took about 18 days, and on that voyage he did some calculations that essentially turned the world of astrophysics around. And he discovered that there is a maximum mass that a neutron star can have. After a star dies, when a star is dying, what is left behind is a neutron star. But only stars of only a certain mass can become a neutron star. Beyond that, the star implodes into something else. Sorry, not neutron star, white dwarf. Neutrons were not known at the time. So what is the maximum mass of a star such that it can become a white dwarf? So our sun, the sun that we have, is going to be a white dwarf someday, in maybe 5 billion years or something. But if it was greater in mass, greater than 1.44 solar masses, then it would not become a white dwarf. It would implode and it would become a neutron star, which is now known now. But what if its mass is such that it can't even become a neutron star? Then it becomes a black hole. So Chandrasekhar's work was all about what happens to stellar collapse. What's the eventual fate of stars, of dying stars? So that's what this was about. And he was a great Indian astrophysicist, but he never worked in India. By the age of 19, he left India because there were no opportunities in India, and he had a scholarship. He was brilliant, so he went to London. And in London, his work conflicted with the work of Arthur Eddington, the greatest astrophysicist of that time, Sir Arthur Eddington, right? And Arthur Eddington was kind of a mentor to Chandrasekhar. So Chandrasekhar published his paper, which kind of extended the work of Ralph Fowler, who was his PhD guide essentially. But Chandrasekhar's work was in conflict with Eddington's work, and Eddington was the greatest astrophysicist of the time. And Eddington believed that these black holes are disgusting things. There should be a law of nature that prevents nature from behaving in such manner. And this is what stellar buffoonery and all that. So one day when Chandrasekhar presented his paper, his research in the Royal Astronomical Society, Eddington ambushed him, and he arranged such that his talk will be right after Chandrasekhar's talk. And Chandrasekhar presented everything properly with all the equations, all the mathematics, all the calculations. And after he was done, Eddington started to talk, and he unleashed a brutal verbal assault on Chandrasekhar, the kind of assault you don't do in polite society. He termed what Chandrasekhar was doing stellar buffoonery, and he completely disparaged Chandrasekhar without showing any mathematical proof that Chandrasekhar was wrong, because Chandrasekhar was never wrong. But he turned Chandrasekhar into essentially an outcast. And because of that, Chandrasekhar had to leave England, and he had to go to the United States. And he spent the rest of his life teaching at the University of Chicago. His first job in the US was at Yerkes Observatory. So a great son of India who could never be an Indian because there are no opportunities in India. And for 30 years, he stayed out of the topic of black holes. He stayed away from black holes. That's how traumatized he was by Eddington's assault on him. And eventually, slowly came back into the physics of black holes 20 years after Eddington died. And eventually, Chandrasekhar wrote the greatest book on black holes. And on his 73rd birthday, I think he got the phone call from Stockholm. You are awarded the Nobel Prize. So that's the story of Subramaniam Chandrasekhar. And yeah. And then to answer Rahul's question, does a black hole lose mass in the form of Hawking radiation? Yes, it does. It does. But can the loss of mass trigger the black hole to become a neutron star? Never. Not possible, according to the laws of physics. So that's the answer. And anyway, if you want to understand the story of Chandrasekhar, I would recommend you read my new book called The Chandrasekhar Limit, which is available on Amazon. The links will be in the description. I think the link is right now not in the description. I'll add it to the description. Check it out. It's a great read, and it's the story of a great son of India who was one of the greatest physicists of all time. He discovered a fundamental law of nature. So please check out this here book, The Chandrasekhar Limit, which has just come out, which I've just released. All right. Next question is by Shubh. What did ancient Indians call our land? Today we call it Bharat Mata. Also, how did the term Bharat Mata emerge during the freedom struggle? Yeah, good question. Good question. All right. So, what did ancient Indians, what did our ancestors call our land? So, the land has been called by different names, different terms. So, one of the terms that has been used was Jambudvipa, which was applied to the entire Indian subcontinent, the land that's essentially south of the Himalayas. All of that is Jambudvip, which extends all the way to Gandhara and the borders of Persia, and eastwards to the borders of the borders of Suvarnabhumi, essentially, which is Southeast Asia, and south all the way to Lanka. So that essentially all of it is Suvarnabhumi. I'm sorry, what? It is Jambudvipa. Jambudvip. That's the subcontinent or the continent of India. Another term that was used for India was Aryavart, which is the land of the Arya people, the noble people. That's us, all of us. No matter whatever skin color, we are all Arya people. The British and the Europeans have tried to appropriate the terminology of Arya. They now so the common understanding today is that Aryan means white people, which is a lie. Arya means us, not the white people. The white people are Anarya. They are not Aryans. They're not Arya people. We are the Arya people, the Indians and the Persians, the original Persians, probably not today's Persians. So that was the Arya people, and our land was called Aryavarta. The Persians had their own term, Aryanam Vijay, or something like that. So Jambudweep, Aryavarta, and of course Bharat. So how does this term Bharat, where did it come from? So one of the ancient clans in India, one of the ancient Rigvedic clans was the Bharata people. And they were well, their king was called Divodas. I think it was his son Sudas who was at the receiving end of this confederation of more than 10 clans, the battle of the 10 kings. And Sudas came out on top. He defeated the entire coalition with the help of Lord Indra, of course. You have to praise Lord Indra. So Sudas and his father Divodas, they were kings of the Bharata clan of our ancestors, and the land is named after them. And there's also King Bharat, of course, the son of Shakuntala and Dushyant. King Dushyant and his wife Shakuntala, they produced that union produced this child called Bharat, and he was the ancestor of the Kauravas and the Pandavas, wasn't he? So that's another Bharat. So yeah, that's the different names that our land has been called by our ancestors. Today we call it Bharat. Some people call it Bharat Mata. Well, let me tell you that Bharat is a masculine name. Okay, Bharat was not the name of Dushyant and Shakuntala's daughter. It was the name of their son. It's a masculine name. I don't know how this term Bharat Mata came about, but maybe it emerged during the independence, the freedom struggle, the struggle against British occupation, possibly. So I have not looked into how the term emerged, Bharat Mata, but it's something that everyone uses today. The Prime Minister likes to say that. Well, it's good. It's something that unifies India, and it's something that resonates with a lot of Indians. So it's fine, even if it's contradictory. Bharat is a masculine name, and you're terming that as Mata. Well, it means motherland, of course, right? Motherland, which is fine, which is good, because the land is our motherland. Aryavarta, Jambudweep, Bharat, or you want to call it Bharat Mata. You can also call it Aryavarta Mata or Jambudweep Mata if you wish. Nothing wrong with that, I would say. If you want to call it Bharat Mata, perfectly fine. I think that's the commonly used term today. So yeah, that's kind of the history. But the original terms were Jambudweep and Aryavart and Bharat. The Chinese called India Tianzhu. Tianzhu means the center of heaven, or the heavenly land, the abode of heaven. So that's what the Chinese called our land, and various other people had different names for the land. Okay. Feminist Slayer says, what was the significance of the Louisiana Purchase in expanding the United States? Very interesting question. Not sure we have taken this question before. So let's take it. Let's first go to the map, because the answer to many of our questions can be found in the map. So I'm going to show you something for reference, and then we'll see something else. So right now we go, oh, please. Now we go westwards and we take a look at the map of the United States. These United States of America, right? This one here. As you can see, it's essentially half of a continent, right? The Mercator projection kind of shows Canada as a gigantic nation compared to the US. It's similar in size, actually. So the United States, as you can see, it's half of a continent. Now let me show you the map of the United States in 1800. Okay, let's go to Google and let's find out. Map of the United States 1800. Map of the USA 1800. Let us see. Okay, check this out. I'll expand this on a different screen so that it'll be easier to see. Here we have it. Okay, check this out. So over here, if you can see, the portion on the right, the green and the orange and the yellow, all of that was the United States. Only that. To the west, you have something called the colony of Louisiana, which belonged to France. As you can see in the center of the screen, the colony of Louisiana, which belonged to France. Can you see how large it is? It was essentially almost as large as the existing United States. And then you had the Viceroyalty of New Spain, which belonged to Spain. And then you had so-called unclaimed territory, which is shown as empty on the map because nothing existed there. No humans, nothing. Or if humans existed, they did not classify as humans, possibly, according to the 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 people of the United States. So the United States was significantly smaller than the United States you imagine today, wasn't it? So you had Connecticut, you had Kentucky, Tennessee, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, which was the original United States. Virginia was uh, the place where Jamestown was founded. The Americans want to forget about Jamestown. It's an inconvenient story. And then you have Pennsylvania, New York, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, all that. And you had the Western Connecticut Western Reserve, and you have the Northwest Territory, all that. So that's all the United States was. And Louisiana, as you can see, this large piece of territory that extends all the way from Canada to the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of Mexico. This gigantic territory belonged to France. So that's the background. Okay, that's what you have to understand before we have this discussion. Now let's have the discussion. So the United States was this small piece of territory comparatively to today's map. Small piece of territory. To the west, you had this huge piece of territory, as almost as large as the existing US, which belonged to France. Uh, and the Louisiana Purchase happened in 1803, at which time France was ruled by Shri Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon. And the foreign minister was Monsieur Talleyrand. Now, the Americans, they were interested in not in the entire territory of Louisiana, but they were interested in one city. Let me show you once again by going to the map which city it was. Here is map. Yes. So the United States, which was only confined to the west, the eastern part of the map, it was interested in a city called Nouvelle Orleans. New Orleans. It's the city where the Mississippi River drains into the Gulf of Mexico. And the Mississippi River starts all the way up north, by the way, all the way up north. It's the largest river system in the world. So, New Orleans was an extremely important port. And the United States wanted to purchase this port from the French. This port belonged to France. It was a French city. Even today, if you go to New Orleans, there's a French Quarter, which is the more cultural side of the city, and so on. That's a digression. So New Orleans is something that the Americans coveted. They wanted this port, and they sent. So you have Thomas Jefferson, who's the president of the U.S. at this time. Okay, and he sent a couple of negotiators, a team of negotiators, a team of diplomats to Paris, to France, to Paris, to negotiate with the French government for the purchase of New Orleans, this one city, this one port. And the Americans were willing to pay $10 million for this one city. We'll pay you $10 million. You transfer the city to us. That was the objective of the mission, of this diplomatic mission, to acquire New Orleans. The maximum price they were willing to give, as instructed by the president, was $10 million. Now, Louisiana, this huge territory that belonged to France, did France actually control it? Well, not really. France did not have any control over much of the territory. Only some parts of the territory were controlled by France, but on paper it owned the territory. Much of the territory was well inhabited. All of it was inhabited by the Native Americans, and they were the true owners of the land. But on paper, France owned it, but France controlled just a little portion of it. So the Americans just wanted New Orleans. In the Napoleonic Wars and all that is happening in Europe. So the American diplomats reach France, and they are willing to negotiate hard. Maximum we will give you is $10 million. Give us New Orleans. They go to Paris, and the Monsieur Talleyrand, the French foreign minister, tells them, "You know what? We would like to offer. Louisiana for $15 million. 15." And the Americans are shocked. They're stunned. There's no telephone. There's no telecommunications. There's no email. There's no WhatsApp. There's nothing. Washington and Paris, they're separated by the Atlantic Ocean. Takes God knows how much time to travel. There's no time. And the Americans were worried that if we don't take the offer right now, Napoleon may take the offer off the table and we may lose New Orleans. So instead of paying $10 million for one city, the negotiators, without consulting the president of the US, they agreed to pay $15 million for the entire territory of Louisiana. And the papers were signed and it happened. And Thomas Jefferson was fine with that. So the negotiators, his diplomats, they correctly assessed that the president, even though he has given us a hard limit of $10 million for one city, he'll be okay to purchase the whole of Louisiana for $15 million, which is shocking. Which is like what? 8, 12, like $15 per square kilometer or something, per square mile. Less than that. It's a throwaway price. So that's what happened. And that instantly doubled the territory of the US in size. And the Americans finally felt that we are a first rate world power now, or we have the potential to be a first rate world power. We're not some little outpost on the Atlantic bank of this continent. We now own half the continent. And we're going to get rid of the goddamn natives, the savage natives, the savages, the goddamn savages. We shall exterminate them and we shall turn this into the land of the whatever it is. Whatever it is, right? So that's what happened. So it was significant. It was hugely significant. It doubled the size of the United States. So we took a look at the map of the US in 1800, right? Let's once again revisit this. The map of the United States 1800. Now let's say 1805. See what happens. Boom, double. You see that? Double the size. Look, back and forth, back, forth, back, forth. It doubled the territory of the United States. It was massively important for the US. So, very significant. Louisiana Purchase. Nirvana Shanks says, what was the Treaty of Westphalia? How did it change the way countries dealt with each other? And what's the principle of sovereignty? Then thank you for your attention to the question. Okay. So the Treaty of Westphalia, it was a treaty that was signed in the 1647, 1648, around 1650. Okay. And this treaty marked the end of a significant period of warfare in Europe. The 30 years war in the Holy Roman Empire, the 80 years war between Spain and the Dutch and that sort of thing. All kinds of warfare was going on forever in Europe. Europe is full of these tribalistic little kingdoms and all that. Some are big, some are small. If you look at Germany, the Germany of the time, my goodness, you will have a heart attack, or that sort of thing. So Europe was marred by tribal warfare. Yeah, these kings and principalities and empires. A little thing is called an empire if it's in Europe, that sort of thing. So you had the 30 years war, you had the war between Spain and the Dutch, which went on for 80 years and all that. And finally, they said that, okay, let's agree to a set of principles. And we're going to call it the Treaty of Westphalia. So the Treaty of Westphalia was not a single treaty that you sit down and sign on one paper. It was a series of agreements or series of treaties that ended this entire period of decades of warfare. So you had political conflict, you had religious conflict, all kinds of conflicts layered together, woven together, which was just going on throughout Europe. So finally, this series of treaties was agreed upon, and it established a set of principles in Europe, and these principles were then applied to the rest of the world, because European values are universal values, right? That sort of thing. So the first principle is that we'll talk about sovereignty. Yes, we will talk about sovereignty, but the first principle in Europe, which was established as per the Treaty of Westphalia, was that each state, each kingdom, so to say, or each state, let's say each political state, could independently determine its own official religion. Now, what are we talking about? Europe had only one religion, right? Christianity. No, but within Christianity, you had schisms, you had factions. You had the Protestants, you had the Calvinists, you had the Huguenots, you had the Lutherans, you had God knows what else, right? So each state could determine what will be its official religion within Christianity. You go beyond Christianity, we're going to kill you all. But if you, as long as you stay within Christianity, and what form of Christianity you want to adopt, all right, sir. So that is what they call religious tolerance. Okay, so we're going to treat Catholics and Protestants alike. You decide what your religion will be. I'll decide what my religion will be. You can be a Catholic guy. I'll be Protestant or whatever, vice versa, whatever, and we will call this tolerance. We shall not tolerate anything except for Christianity, but we'll call this tolerance. Okay, so that's the first thing, that each state could determine its own official religion, and that's called religious tolerance. Second, importantly, each state is legally equal. So you may be 1,000 square kilometers, I may be 10,000 square kilometers, that guy may be 100 square kilometers, but as long as you are a state, we are all equal, legally equal. So it's like a nation with a population of 1 million having the same exact vote as a nation with a population of 100 million, that sort of thing, right? All states are equal. In India, all states are equal, whether it is a state with 3 million population or 300 million population. UP is equal to Manipur, right? In the parliament, that sort of thing, or in Indian federalism, you get the same amount of weight, legal weight, legal. So you have legal equality. So that sort of thing. That principle was it became a thing because of the Treaty of Westphalia, the legal equality of state. I don't care what your size is. I don't care what your power is. We're gonna be legally equal. And then there was the principle of non-interference in internal affairs. So you do what you want in your country. I'll look into it. I may look at it. I may see what's happening, but I will not interfere. And I'll do what I want in my country. You stay out of it. All right. Non-interference. It became a bench. I mean, it became a principle of international relations. And then they normalized diplomacy and treaties to resolve conflicts. That became more prominent. So that essentially laid the groundwork for the international system that we have today. So we don't go to war. We do diplomatic negotiations. We arm twist each other diplomatically. We see who has more leverage. We issue threats behind closed doors, but we don't actually go to war. We use economic means. We use other means. We don't go to war. So essentially, international organizations came out, emerged as a consequence of this. Because if each state has equal legal weight, because there is legal equality, then coalitions become important. So I have 10 members in my coalition. How many you have? Oh, you only have 4. We outnumber you. We are legally uh, a bigger power compared to you. That sort of thing, right? And one more thing is the end of religious authority. So the Pope was very influential. The Vatican was super influential, right? And that was ended. So the interference of the Vatican in the internal affairs of various nations, of various kingdoms, that was ended. And there was this gradual, as a consequence, a gradual shift towards what they call secular governance. Secularism. The 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 distinction between the separation of church and state, that came out of the Treaty of Westphalia. And the concept of balance of power also came out of this, because now that the church is no longer interfering, and each state has legal equality. So wherever you have coalitions, we will see how many states are in which coalition, and how many we have on which side, and that creates a balance of power, right? That sort of thing. So all of this introduced the various key principles that underpin today's international system, or supposedly underpin today's international system. State sovereignty, that each state determines the way it's going to be run, its laws, its policies, its practices. And so each state determines what happens in the state, and it's going to be free from external interference, external influence, non-intervention. You stay out of my affairs, I stay out of your affairs. Legal equality, all states have the same equal rights in the international realm, in international relations. And religious pluralism, as long as it is Christianity, that sort of thing. So that is the Treaty of Westphalia, and that essentially underpins the international order today. The Atlantic Charter, which is the US based, the US the American um, application of this, the supposed universality of uh, Western principles, Western whatever it is. That started with the Atlantic Charter. It's kind of an extension of this, you could say, and it gave America the pretext of the illusion of moral superiority over the world, the U.S. and England as well, Britain. So the English-speaking world, they said that our values will now be the universal values, which have to be, applied everywhere, and every nation must uphold these values. That's sort of nonsense. So anyway, that's the Treaty of Westphalia. It did change the way countries deal with each other once it was applied to the entire world. Math and Slam. Okay, I can't pronounce the name, but let's take the question. How did dynasty after dynasty of Turkic origin, like the Seljuks, the Khwarezm Shahs, the Timurids, the Safavids, the Afshars, the Qajars, etc., how did they all become Persianized over time in Iran, but did not become Indicized in India, like the Turks of the Delhi Sultanate and the Gurkhani Mughals? Why is that so? Interesting question. Interesting question. Cause and effect. Let's look at cause and effect. I mean, they should teach these things in history classes. I'm not sure if they do. So the Turks. We should actually take the question of how did the Turks become Muslim? But we'll take that question after this question. I've also selected that question. So now, so we know that after a certain point in time, after a certain period of history, the Turks were all Muslims, right? All Turks were Muslims. And the Turks, they served in various. Some Turks acted as mercenaries in various armies, whether it is the Abbasid army of the Abbasid Caliphate or various Persian armies or whatever. And the Persians were the first non-Arabic people, essentially the first major non-Arabic civilization to become essentially almost entirely Islamized, right? So the Persians were Muslims. By the time the Turks had become Muslim, the Persians were already Muslim. And the Persians were part of the Islamic world, correct? Now, in the Islamic world, the Persian culture, their literature, their architecture, their language, all of this was held in high regard, in high esteem. It was considered to be superior culture, superior manifestation of Islamic culture, perhaps even superior to the Arabic. Perhaps superior to the Arabic culture. Maybe some people would regard it as that. So that's why. So because Persia was regarded as kind of the epitome of Islamic culture, that's why everyone wanted to copy those that culture, obviously, right? So the barrier, it doesn't exist that it's a non-Islamic culture. So it's okay to adopt that because they're also Muslims and they practice this culture which is regarded very highly in the entire Islamic world. Let's copy that. Let's become like them. Let's start using that sort of language. Let's perhaps use Persian as the court language. Yes, and we can hire some Persian bureaucrats and have them keep records for us, because Persian is clearly a better language for record keeping and bookkeeping than the Turkic language. That sort of thing. So that's why Turks became Persianized, and obviously Turks, they later ruled Persia, as we know. And that barbarian Nadir Shah was not Persian; he was Turkic. Anyhow, so that's how the Turks gradually became Persianized because of the great prominence that Persian culture had in the Islamic world. Now the Turks also, they ruled Persia. They conquered and ruled Persia. They also conquered and ruled India eventually, parts of India at least, didn't they? And the Turks never became Indianized. I mean, the Mughal dynasty, some of those kings, they married Indian ladies, but there's so by the time you have someone like who, uh, for example, Akbar married various Indian ladies. Akbar's mother was not Indian; his mother was Turkic or whatever she was, but he married an Indian lady. So his successor was, who was it? Salim Jahangir. So Jahangir was half Indian. Now, I suppose if Jahangir married an Indian lady, his son Shah Jahan would be three quarters Indian. So he would look more Indian than Turkic. And so many of the Mughal emperors had kings, had Indian wives, but they never became culturally Indian. They may have started looking Indian there as the generations went by, but they culturally remained Turkic. Why is that? That's the big question. Why is that? And why, since they adopted Persian so readily, why didn't they adopt Indian culture the same way? Because there's a barrier. Indian culture isn't Islamic. You can't adopt a non-Islamic culture. Persian was already the Persian culture was already Islamic. It was already a part of the Islamic world. So see what happened in Persia is that Persia got Islamized in a matter of years. India was various parts of India were under Turkic occupation, Arabic occupation, whatever, for like close to a millennium. Some parts of India, those never became Islamized completely, except for Gandhar. And even in Gandhar, which is Afghanistan today, you still had Hindus and Afghans until the end of the 20th century. You still have some Sikhs, sorry, not Afghans, Sikhs. You still possibly have Sikh people in Gandhar in Afghanistan today. I'm not sure if there are still any, but even in the 21st century, you had Sikh people who lived in Afghanistan, and they were not Indian Afghans. They were Afghan Indian Sikhs. They were Afghan Sikhs. They were Pashtun Sikhs, right? Uh, So India never Islamized the way Persia Islamized, which is why Indian culture was always regarded as a non-Islamic culture, right? As an infidel culture. And that's why the Mughals, even though many of them were of Indian ancestry, largely, they still could not see Indian culture as their culture because we are Turks. And Indian culture is non-Islamic. So how can we adopt Indian culture? So Indian culture did creep in everywhere. Yeah, it did creep in, but officially they remained non-Indian, which is why I do not consider any of the Mughal kings or emperors as Indians. Kanishka was Indian. Akbar was not Indian. He was not. Okay, that's my opinion. You may not agree with me. That's okay. You have the right to your opinion. I do not see Akbar or Jalaluddin. His name was Jalaluddin, right? Yeah, Zahiruddin Babar and Humayun, and then you have Jalaluddin Akbar, which is very strange because there was another Jalaluddin the coward, who Genghis Khan was pursuing all the way to India. so, so, so none of the Mughal kings were Indian because they never adopted Indian culture. They never became Indian. They remained, even if they may have been born in India, even if generations of Mughals were born in India, they still remained outsiders. They considered themselves to be foreigners. So it is not right to call them Indians. Just being born in a land doesn't make you a person who belongs to the land, right? Right, there you have it. Okay, next question. Maybe this question should have been taken first. Anyhow, that's fine. So, Sharma 108X says, how and why did the Turks become Muslim and why didn't the Mongols? Good question, interesting question. Comparative history. The Turks and the Mongols, first of all, what are their origins? So, the Turks, their origin is the Hunnic peoples. I mean, for example, if you look at our history, Indian history, uh, the Huns attempted multiple invasions of India, wave after wave of invasion of India during the second half of the time period of the Gupta Empire. And they were called the White Huns, the Shweta Hunas. And the Huns were attempting this invasion of India at the same time when they were invading Rome. So that's how widespread the Huns were. And what was the origin of the Huns? The origin of the Huns was in the land that we now call Mongolia. So the Mongol people and the Hunnic people are essentially, they have the same ancestry, the same origin. What's the word for human being in the Mongol language today? Hunnu. Okay, or who? So there is that. So the Mongols and the Huns had the same ancestry. But the Mongols, they remained in Mongolia. The Huns went wandering around the world. They became nomads. And eventually the Huns, they conquered some parts of India. Some of their kings were utterly nasty, like what's his name? Toramana, or was it Mihirkul? Mihirkul, no, Toraman was okay. He built the Bamiyan Buddhas. Good guy. Good. We approves. But Mihirkul was an absolute barbarian. No one liked him. The Buddhists hated him. The Hindus hated him. Everyone hated him. He was an absolute atheist and a complete barbarian. So Mihirkul was nasty. But the other Hunnic kings were they became Indian, of course. For example, the patron of Brahmagupta was a Hunnic king. Okay, his name was Vyagramukh. So the patron of the great Indian astronomer Brahmagupta. Now, anyway, coming back to the Turks. The Turks, the Huns eventually became the Turks. So how did they become Muslim is the question. Hmm? So over time, because of their presence in Central Asia, the Turks, let's call them Turks now, they came in contact with the Abbasid Caliphate. And the Turks were nomads and they were very tough, hardy people because they live in such extreme conditions. So they are naturally going to be good warriors. And they had this practice of raiding and all that. So they were good warriors. So some of the Turks became mercenaries. They became employed by the Abbasid Caliphate. They became soldiers in the Abbasid armies and so on. And that's how they discovered Islam. And some of them, because they were employed there and maybe they had children there, they may have married some local ladies or whatever, they eventually became Islamized. And somehow that's kind of the process by which Islam spread among the Turks. The Turks were never conquered by the Arabs. The Turks seem to have adopted Islam voluntarily. That's as far as I can see. Maybe I'm wrong. I've not studied the history in great detail, but there was contact between the Turks and the Abbasid empire or caliphate. The Abbasid Caliphate was from 750 AD to about 1258. 1258 is when the Mongols put a full stop to the Abbasid Caliphate. Shri Hulegu Khan. But that's a different story. So he was Shri Chinggis Khan's descendant, but that's a different story. So 750 AD to 1258 AD is the Abbasid Caliphate. And that's the time when you had significant interaction between the Turks and the Abbasids. And that's how the Turks somehow became Islamic. So the Turks became a Muslim. Now, why didn't the Mongols become Muslim? Because they're the same people, same ancestry, same heritage, kind of, right? Well, first of all, the Abbasids never reached Mongolia. They never did. Mongolia was way far away, way to the east. So there was no Islamic presence anywhere near Mongolia. I mean, around 1080, for example. No, nothing at all. Nothing at all. And the Turks, they practiced originally the same religion, the polytheistic religion, as the Mongols, which is in English called Tengrism, which is a polytheistic religion which with multiple deities. The two principal deities are Tengri, the Sky Father, and Umai, the Earth Mother. But here we have other deities also in what you call Tengrism. It's not monotheistic by any means. Some people try to mischaracterize Tengrism as monotheistic, which is a lie. So the Turks were polytheists. The Mongols were also polytheists. Same religion. The Turks became Muslims. The Mongols somehow were more resistant than the Turks. Eventually, what happened is that the Mongol Empire became so vast, so gigantic after a generation or two after Genghis Khan, that the Western Mongol Empire, the Golden Horde, the Ilkhanate, etc., they became Turkicized and they became Islamized slowly, gradually, by intermarrying and by ruling over so many Muslims. It made sense for them to become Muslim. So that's how the Western expanses of the Mongol Empire became Muslim, and they became Turkic. Then you can no longer call them Mongols; they became Turks. But in the Mongol Empire itself, um, Islam never made any inroads. Why is that? There seems to have been some significant resistance to Islam in Mongolia among the Mongols. For example, we know that Shri Chinggis Khan he conquered half the world, and he launched his conquests because of a sense of justice, that I was wronged and I need to uh, no one's going to give me justice, I need to go and get justice myself. So he had sent an embassy to the Shah of Khwarazm. Genghis Khan wanted Mongolia to trade with Khwarazm, but the Shah of Khwarazm had the embassy killed. He had them beheaded. And then Genghis Khan sends a second embassy asking for justice. And the Muslim guy who was part of the embassy, because you're dealing with Muslims, he was beheaded, and the others were, their heads were shaved and sent back. So then Genghis Khan said, "Okay, I'm going to go to war with you. I'm going to smash you out of existence," and that's what he did. So Genghis Khan has the record. The Islamic world hates Genghis Khan because Genghis Khan killed more Muslims than anybody has ever done in history. Okay, um, so maybe Genghis Khan got developed some aversion, perhaps, to Islam during his conquests of the Islamic world. Okay, maybe he did not like something about it. I don't know what it is, but so Genghis Khan had this policy of what you call religious tolerance. He had a gigantic empire with subjects who practiced all kinds of religions. You obviously had Tengrism, which is the Mongol religion. You had Buddhism. You had Tibet, which is part of the Mongol Empire. You had northern India, which would have some parts of northern India where would have had Hindus also, and you had a gigantic Muslim population in the Western Mongol Empire. So Genghis Khan had given everybody the freedom to practice their religion. You do whatever you want. I'm not going to interfere. There's only one thing he had banned. Only one thing he had banned. And Shri Kublai Khan also continued this. He had banned halal slaughter. So there was something. I don't know what it was. So Genghis Khan started this practice that I will not allow halal slaughter. And Kublai Khan also continued that. So by the time of Kublai Khan, Buddhism had become the de facto state religion, not officially, but unofficially, it was the state religion. Um, but this practice started with Genghis Khan, not with Kublai Khan. So even during Kublai Khan's time, he was the emperor of China, by the way, Kublai Khan, Genghis Khan's grandson. So even during Kublai Khan's time, everything was allowed. You could practice anything you want, any religion, but the practice of halal slaughter was not allowed. So I don't know the reason, the cause for that, but the Mongols did not allow that. And yeah, so they had a much more vigorous resistance to Islam compared to the Turks, who readily adopted it. You won't find Islam in Mongolia today, except for some people who are not Mongols who may practice it, a small minority of people like the Kazakhs or whatever. But you won't find Mongols practicing Islam. Mongols will practice a syncretic religion, which is a mixture, a combination of Tengrism and Buddhism. That's what Mongols practice today. Rahul Dunake says historically Indian swordsmen used a curved sword, the talwar sword, right? From the Mahabharata times to Chhatrapati Shivaji. We don't know about Mahabharata times, what kind of swords we had, but Chhatrapati Shivaji's time, yes, of course, yeah. The Japanese samurai swords, the katanas, are also slightly curved, but the Roman sword, the swords that medieval European warriors used, these were straight swords like a Christian cross. Which among them were the best considering the sharpness, weight, type of metal, and balance? Okay, interesting question. Really interesting question. So, if you look at the Rajput swords, the Maratha swords, these are curved blades, talwars, right? Talwar swords, curved blades. Even if you look at the Japanese katana, the Japanese katana doesn't have the exact same curvature as the Indian talwar sword. It's slightly longer, it's slightly thinner, and it's got a more subtle curvature. It's a slightly curved sword. It's not a significantly curved sword. And the metal is also different. So the Indian swords, they use carbon steel, which is what the West now calls Damascus steel, but the Damascus steel was imported from India, by the way. So it's Indian steel. So it's a high quality steel, and the curvature of the sword is designed for slashing motions. Slashing, not poking, not that, but slash, especially from horseback. So these curved swords were great for slashing from horseback, slashing at infantry, for example, or maybe even other horsemen, that sort of thing. And the Indian swords were pretty light, actually. The talwar swords, 1 kilo, 1.2 kilos, around that kind of weight, not heavy at all. So I mean, yeah, when you're fighting for like 3 hours, 4 hours straight, 1 kilo becomes 100 kilos. But that's why you have to be a warrior. It's not for everyone. So the swords are pretty light, 1 kilo, 1.2 kilo. If you go to museums and you see the swords, okay, you can go to a museum and find those talwar swords there. The first thing when I saw saw examples of these swords, was how small the hilts were. It's like people were smaller at the time. Like my hand won't fit in. I mean, I don't know if the swords that I saw in that the museum were display pieces of what it was, but it's like, how on earth do you grip that? You can't put your hand in there. Anyway, so the swords were pretty light, 1 kilo to 1.2 kilos, and uh, the Japanese katana is about 1.2 to 1.5 kilos. So it's kind of somewhat heavier, like 20-30% heavier than the Indian talwar sword, but it's got such a balance that it feels very light. So kind of feels lighter than what it actually is. That's the thing about the Japanese katana. Okay. And the Japanese katana is also used for slashing motions, not for poking motions. That sort of thing. So that's the Japanese katana, that sort of slashing thing. Even the Indian talwar, slashing motions. When it comes to the Roman sword, the Roman sword is called the gladius. The gladius. And what do you call someone who uses the gladius? A gladiatore. Do you understand the origin of the term gladiator? A person who wields the gladius. So the Roman sword was perfectly straight, and it was used. The Romans used the thrusting motion, not the slashing motion. Of course, it was a double bladed sword, so you could use it with slashing motions, but the primary way of using the sword, the gladius, was the thrusting motion. And that's something each Roman soldier was trained at, how to thrust. uh, and that's what differentiated the Romans from uh, the Roman soldiers from other warriors. And the various other swords in Europe, they kind of have continued the tradition of the gladius, that sort of thing. So yeah, and they were all made from different steel, so they all were used in different ways. So the gladius was used for fighting face to face, hand to hand fighting in close combat, not from horseback. That's what the gladius was used for. And the British longsword was used by knights on horseback, and that they used it kind of like kind of like a lance, like a javelin, or sometimes you could use it two-handed, that sort of thing. But it was not something that was agile, like the French épée, for example. The French épée is super light. It's something that you use in that Olympic sword, right? The Olympic sport called fencing. That's the French épée. It's a super flexible kind of thing. Well, today's épée is that way, super flexible. Historically, it wasn't that flexible. So each of these weapons served a different purpose. Some were more flexible, some had better balance, some had more resilience, and some were lighter, some were heavier, and so on. But we have to remember that the sword is the equivalent of the guitar in music. What do I mean by that? People think of music as something that you need the guitar for, right? But there's so much music that doesn't involve any guitars. But the guitar is the cool instrument in music right now. Similarly, the sword seems to be the cool instrument. Like, without a sword, you can't fight. But it's not like it's the only weapon that soldiers carry. Many soldiers never carried swords. Some of them carried spears. Some of them carried daggers. Some of them carried if you look at the Japanese, the shuriken. That's a ninja weapon, of course. Some people carried axes. We called it the parashu in Sanskrit, the axe, right? There's the bow and arrow. That's another great weapon, right? So it's not like the sword is the only weapon that can be used in warfare. You can have soldiers who have never touched the sword, and they are great soldiers, great warriors. Uh, so that's something you have to keep in mind. That's larger context that we have to think about in warfare. And of course, in today's warfare, no one carries swords because obsolete now, aren't they? Right, next question. Hinsi Penguin says, why did Ea Nasser send low quality copper? Who is Ea Nasser? Yeah. So what Hensing Penguin is talking about is the world's oldest recorded customer complaint. Let me show you what I mean by that. I will not mention Ea Nasser, but I shall put this on the screen, and I'll Google for world's oldest customer complaint. World's oldest customer complaint. So the person who's written the complaint, his name is Nanni. He is an ancient Mesopotamian customer, and he has done a, I mean, he's purchased copper from a merchant called Ea Nasser, and this goes back to about 1750 BC. So there's this complaint tablet to Ea Nasser that was excavated in the city of Ur. It was written around 1750 BC. As always, statutory warning: Wikipedia is not necessarily a good source of knowledge information, especially for Indian topics, but this is fine. So this is the complaint letter. It's a small letter. It's not huge. It's not something you have to carry on horseback. It's a small thing. Yeah, this sort of thing. And this is a customer complaint. So Nani, the customer, he had sent his servant to meet this merchant called Ea Nasser, and he had sent money with his servant, and the servant handed over the money to Ea Nasser, and the deal was that Ea Nasser will then take the money and send a consignment of high quality copper ingots, copper metal pieces, to Nani. So Nani sent his servant, his guy, his minion, to go and hand over the money and formalize the sale. So what happened eventually is that Ea Nasser, who was a copper merchant, he sent a consignment of copper to Nani, but there was low grade copper. Their agreement was high quality copper, but Ea Nasser took the money and sent the agreed upon quantity of low grade copper, not high grade copper. The quantity was correct, but the grade was poor. So Nani is upset, of course, and he writes a letter. This is the letter that I showed you. He writes a letter and he complains in the letter. But first of all, you were rude to my servant. There was no need for that. What was the need? Why do you have to be rude to my guy? Secondly, you took the money and you gave me inferior grade copper. I have no use for it. I need high quality copper for my business. So I have we have I have given you the money, but the sale is not concluded. That's what he's saying. You got to take this back. You got to send me the right quality of copper. That's what this letter is all about. It's a dispute. It's a complaint. He's complaining about the poor treatment of his servant, and complaining about the poor grade of the copper he received. And he's saying that this sale is not complete. I have given you the money, but I've not received what I've paid for. So you've got to do what you've got to send me the right grade of copper. After that, what happened? We have no idea. We have no idea because we don't have a follow up. We don't have a follow up. Any follow up to this. I mean, it's not an email thread, email thread or whatever you call it, right? That you can see what happened at various dates. So we don't know how this matter was resolved or not, whether it was resolved or not, and how it was resolved. But it's the oldest known customer complaint. It's in the city of Ur in Mesopotamia around the year 1750 BC. Very interesting. So why did Ea Nasser send low quality copper? Maybe he was a crook. Maybe he was trying to cut corners. Maybe Nani lived far, far away, and that's why he had to send a servant. Maybe they're not in the same city, so it doesn't matter. Maybe he lives in a different kingdom. My kingdom is a supplier of copper, and maybe he lives in a kingdom where there's less copper, so they need to buy it from me. And what you gonna do now? You're gonna send your king with an army? Why will your king do that? He's on good terms with my king. That sort of thing. So we don't know what happened at the end, but yeah, very interesting. Kind of funny if you read it now. It must be really infuriating when it happened. It would not be funny at all when it happened. But today we can all have a laugh at these people's expense, especially poor Nani. He sent the money, he did everything right, and he got low quality copper. Obviously, he'll be upset about that, right? So the villain of the story is this guy, Ea Nasser. Okay, Amisha Mishra says, why did Zoroastrianism, ancient Egyptian religions, ancient Greek/Roman religions, and Old Norse religions almost get totally destroyed? But why not Judaism? Interesting question. It is true that ancient Zoroastrianism, I mean, not ancient, but Zoroastrianism itself almost got wiped out. Today, you have a few Zoroastrians who still survive in Persia, in Iran, and you have a larger but declining population of Zoroastrians who live in India, who have been in India for about 1100 years or so, more than 1,000 years. And their ancestors came from Persia, but 1,000 plus years ago. So, and you also have newer Zoroastrians who came about a couple of centuries ago to India. After they discovered that older Zoroastrians have been staying in India for 1,000 years, some more Zoroastrians came in recently, like in the past couple of 100 years or something. The Irani cafes and all those people, they are the newer migrants to India. Parsis, Zoroastrians. So Zoroastrianism is almost wiped out, right? In its original homeland, Persia. Ancient Egyptian religion entirely gone, not a trace survives. No one practices it today, completely wiped out of existence. The ancient Greek religion, completely gone, nothing survives. Ancient Roman religion, absolutely nothing survives whatsoever. No one practices it today. Old Norse religion, well, it was wiped out more recently. No one practices the old Norse religion today, but people are kind of trying Nordic revival religions like Asatru, which kind of worships the old gods Thor, Odin, and so on, but they do it in a kind of modern way. It's not the old Norse religion, it's a revival religion. It's not a continuation of the old Norse religion. So all these religions were always were wiped out, apart from Zoroastrianism, which kind of still survives in small number, in small populations. So why did all these religions get obliterated? Zoroastrianism, not quite, but still. But why not Judaism? Why did Judaism survive? Is the question. Well, you have to ask yourself, what obliterated these religions? These are all polytheistic religions, by the way. And now some very intelligent people are going to say, "Ye to this Abhijit always lies." Now he's claiming Zoroastrianism is polytheistic. See, another lie of Chavda is caught. That's what they will say. Let me show you something. There are many people who try to portray Zoroastrianism as uh, a monotheistic religion. Let's see what the Wikipedia itself has to say. Wikipedia is not a reliable source of information, right? Let's see what it says. Zoroastrianism. Let us see what Wikipedia has to say about Zoroastrianism. All right. Dina Zarathustra, etc. Zarathustra Spitama. No, first, no, that's okay. That's all right. So opinions vary among scholars as to whether Zoroastrianism is monotheistic, polytheistic, henotheistic, or a combination of all three. That's fine. Okay. I don't care about someone's opinions. Let's look at the facts. So let's go down: etymology, theology, nature of the divine. Okay, look here. Look at what Wikipedia says. Zoroastrianism contains multiple classes of divine beings. What is a divine being? It's a god, right? Multiple classes of gods who are typically organized into tiers and spheres of influence. The Ahuras. They are a class of gods inherited by Zoroastrianism from the prehistoric Indo-Iranian religion. What was this prehistoric Indo-Iranian religion? In the Rig Veda. Oh, the book, one of the books of this prehistoric Indo-Iranian religion was the Rig Veda. I see. The ancient religion of Persia was Hinduism. Okay, they are forced to accept it in Wikipedia. Where here indirectly they are not saying that they're calling it the prehistoric Indo-Iranian religion. What prehistoric means? Before 1 AD, right? Even Zoroastrian is prehistoric then. And then they're mentioning the Rig Veda because that's the only source of knowledge they have now, right? So in the Rig Veda, Asura denotes the older gods, and Vitra, Mitra, Varuna, etc. They are Asuras, yes. So the Asuras are a class of gods in Zoroastrianism. Then you have the greatest of the Asuras, the Ahura Mazda, right? Of course. Then you have Ahura Mitra or Mitra Varun. Come on, Mitra. Then you have the Yazatas, divine beings worshipped by song and sacrifice. What were these so-called sacrifices? Yasnas, which is the same as our yajnas. All right. So Zoroastrianism is not a monotheistic religion. Here, Wikipedia itself is saying that they have different class of divine beings, but they are using the term divine being so that they don't have to use the word God. Because if you use the word God, then you're taking a stance. They are saying it's polytheistic. We want to keep it vague, deliberately vague. So we'll say various classes of divine beings. Now, in Christianity, they will say there are divine beings. There are angels and demons. There's Lucifer, the bringer of light. And demons may be evil, but angels are good, right? But they're not God. They're only slightly divine beings. So that way in Zoroastrianism also you have Ahuras, Asuras and all. They're like angels. They're not really gods. That's the kind of obfuscation these people will do. The fact is very clear. Zoroastrianism is a polytheistic religion. And today, even Zoroastrians themselves will oppose this. Some of them, no, 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 no. We only believe in Ahura Mazda and Angra Mainyu and all these Ahuras and Yazatas and all. They're like spirits or angels in Christianity. It's monotheistic. Many Zoroastrians themselves do this now. I have no idea why. Whatever. The fact is that Zoroastrianism is a polytheistic religion. So was ancient Egyptian religion. So was ancient Greek religion. So was ancient Roman religion. So was the old Norse religion. So was entire Europe's culture. And all of that was destroyed by what? By one out of two, by either of the two major Abrahamic religions, Islam or Christianity. So Zoroastrianism, what a complicated thing to say, tongue twister for me. My tongue doesn't work fine. Zoroastrianism was wiped out by Islam to a large extent. Ancient Egyptian religion was wiped out by Islam to a complete extent. It was obliterated. Ancient Greek religion was wiped out by Christianity. Ancient Roman religion was wiped out by Christianity. Ancient Nordic religion was wiped out by Christianity. It's one of the two Abrahamic religions that has wiped out a polytheistic religion. Judaism is the original Abrahamic religion. So that won't be wiped out, right? Of course, today you have a conflict between the Jews and the Muslims. That's a whole different story. And apparently, it is said that the prophet of the Muslims had some animosity, perhaps, towards the Jews. I'm not sure. I don't know about their history in any detail, but that's kind of the sense that I get. So yeah, so Judaism is not a polytheistic religion. It's the original Abrahamic religion, and that's why you can't wipe that out, right? You can't. Polytheistic cultures and religions, it's okay, fair game. All right. Okay, two questions about essentially the same topic. Rudra Golba says, it is said that humans contain some amount of genes from Neanderthals. Is there a chance of some interbreeding that might have happened, and why? And Amisha says, why are Homo sapiens and Neanderthals considered to be separate species? What could be the reason that the Neanderthal DNA is found in modern humans? Did humans and Neanderthals interbreed with each other? Does Neanderthal DNA come from both males and females? Very interesting questions. First of all, many people believe that humans and Neanderthals are separate species, so I can understand the confusion completely. The fact is that we are subspecies. We are not different species, we are subspecies. Now, I'm going to compare it with other species, and if it upsets somebody, don't be upset. Okay? So, for example, I love to talk about other species as a comparative measure. So don't be upset that I'm comparing humans with animals. Just a comparison for illustrative purposes. This is a scientific discussion. All right. So think about man's best friend, the dog, and think about his cousin, the wolf. We have so many species, so many different kinds of wolves on the planet. We have the Indian wolf, right? What's the wolf's name in the Jungle Book? Akela, right? Mowgli's clan or whatever. Akela, wolf clan. So we have the Indian wolf, we have the Himalayan wolf, we have the European wolf, we have the wolf. Wolf is it's a species of animal, right? And the dog. The dog is a subspecies of the wolf. It's not a separate species. The dog and the wolf are the same species but different subspecies. So the dog and the wolf can interbreed and they can have children, offspring, which are the same species once again. So the dog and the wolf are the same species. Similarly, humans and Homo sapiens and Neanderthals were also the same species but different subspecies. Okay, so for example, lion and tiger, they are different species. They can interbreed, but I'm not sure if their offspring are fertile. Maybe they are sterile. I'm not sure. Horse and donkey can interbreed, but their offspring is mule, which I think is sterile. It's not fertile. It can't have offspring of its own. But humans and Neanderthals, they did interbreed, and their offspring were not sterile, they were fertile. They were able to pass on their genes, which means that humans and Neanderthals were genetically very, very close. Same species, maybe separate subspecies. Uh, so yes, interbreeding did happen. Now don't ask me why. That's a choice. It's a personal choice. People have choices, and people make choices as to what kind of partner you want to have, and don't question the choices. Same species, you can do it. Okay. Okay, this is a really funny topic somehow. So why it happened, don't ask me why. I don't know the motivations. But our ancestors, Homo sapiens ancestors, they came out of Africa about 80,000 years ago, maybe 85,000 years ago, maybe 60,000 years ago. We don't know exactly when the out of Africa migration happened, but that's the best theory that we have, that there was an out of Africa migration that gave rise to the modern Homo sapiens population. So when this out of Africa migration happened, you had Neanderthals who already lived in Eurasia, and they may have emerged out of Africa maybe half a million years before Homo sapiens, maybe 700,000 years before Homo sapiens. But we were still sufficiently close enough genetically that we were still the same species. So if you look at depictions of Neanderthals, they are depicted as really ugly and hideous creatures. Maybe they were not that ugly and hideous. Maybe they were good-looking people. Who knows? So there was some to some extent there was interbreeding. Sorry, not inbreeding, interbreeding between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals. Uh, do we carry so? The consequence of that is that even though the Neanderthals have ceased to exist as a separate subspecies, they haven't gone entirely extinct, because most non-African people carry some Neanderthal DNA, which means most non-African people have some Neanderthal ancestry, which means that there is some Neanderthal blood in you. It means that Neanderthal DNA is not extinct. So what's the percentage of DNA? Maybe around 4%, 5%. It's like having one great, if if one parent is Neanderthal, you 50, right? 50%. If one grandparent, it's 25. If one great grandparent, it's 12.5. If one great great grandparent, it's about having like one great great grandparent who was Neanderthal. It's not going to be really visible, that you will not have bigger bones or bigger brows or like whatever, but it's going to be subtle. So all the good traits, beneficial traits that will be beneficial for survival, you will have absorbed them, and you would carry them without knowing that it's Neanderthal DNA. Yeah. So, and it is said that in India, now this is the funny part. Out of all the non-African humans, Indians, I believe, as from what I know, carry the least amount of Neanderthal DNA. Why, I don't know. Maybe why? Maybe I can tell you why. Let's go to the map. Okay, let me open the map and let's examine the map to understand why Indians carry the least amount of Neanderthal DNA in all the non-African humans. Why is that? Let's find out once again. Let me hide the question for a second. Let us embiggen this. This is better. Yeah. So the out of Africa migration probably happened around here. Here, the Strait of Bab al Mandeb. Okay, so they crossed over here, the African ancestors of all non-African humans, and then right now it's all desert everywhere, Yemen, Oman. But at that time, whenever this migration happened, along the coastline, you would see green. You can see some small patches of green here, right? Some small patches of green. Little bit of vegetation is there. If you look at the satellite image, you can see some vegetation. So at that time, the entire coastline, like this, was just barely green to be able to somehow support a small number of people. So they traveled all the way northwards along the Arabian Peninsula, and probably somewhere here they crossed again the Strait of Hormuz. And then the further over here also, you probably had greenery along the coastline. So they kept on following the greenery until they reached the Indian subcontinent, which was entirely green, super fertile. It could support any kind of human population in the millions if you needed. So that's where Homo sapiens first settled down. And eventually, when they were all rested after a few thousand years and all, they said, okay, let's go wandering, because that's the nature of Homo sapiens. And from here, from India, from the subcontinent, they spread out in all directions. And during this journey from Bab al Mandeb along the coast of Arabia, after crossing the Strait of Hormuz and going eastwards, there were no Neanderthals in that region. Neanderthals are found in present day Israel, in present day Anatolia, in the western part of Eurasia, but not really in the subcontinent or near the subcontinent. Which is why before they came to India, they did not encounter any Neanderthals. But only when they expanded out of India at a later date and went westwards, that's when they encountered Neanderthals and interbred with Neanderthals, which is why people who live in the western regions, they have like 4% or something Neanderthal ancestry, while Indians have negligible Neanderthal ancestry. So unless, for example, if you take me, my ancestry is mainly from western India, which means that I would most likely not have any Neanderthal ancestry unless I have ancestors who are Aryan invaders. So the only way I can have Neanderthal ancestry if is if my ancestors were the evil white-skinned Aryan invaders. Yeah. And some people tell me I look like an Aryan invader, so maybe. So anyway, so that's the deal with the Neanderthals, right? Does Last question by Amisha is that does Neanderthal DNA come from both males or females? I'm not sure. I know the answer to that. That's an interesting question. I suppose it would come from both. Do we have? Is it like, what kind of DNA do we have? Is it autosomal DNA? Is it somatic DNA? Is it sex chromosome DNA? Not sure about that. I'll have to look into that. That's an interesting question. Right, next. Amisha says, what's the difference between race and ethnicity? Okay, race and ethnicity. Look, see, first of all, race and ethnicity, these are not scientific terms. You can't define these two terms precisely, but they are used in different contexts. For example, when you talk about race, okay, the race is a Western uh, concept. The Westerners, after they became all powerful in the past 500 years, they created the idea of like 4, 5, 6 races. The the Caucasian race, the African race, the Mongolian race, the Australoid race, and I don't know. I'm not sure what other races may exist. Uh, so that's race. It's based on just broad skin color. Uh, so someone like me, they would consider me to be somewhere on the intersection in the Venn diagram of the Australoid and Caucasian race. Uh, if it's somebody from Sweden or whatever, they would consider them to be pure Caucasian. If it's somebody from, for example, an Australian Aboriginal people, they'll say you're Australoid. If it is somebody from Mongolia or China, they will say you are Mongoloid. But if it's somebody from Indonesia, they'll say you are a mixture of Australoid and Mongoloid, and that sort of thing. So, and if you're from Africa, they'll say you're what? Yeah, it was the N word, Negroid, which was the term that they used to use. The racist Europeans, not we, them. So that is race. That's based on very broad skin color classifications. And there were some other nuances like phrenology, study of brain size and shape, and skull size and shape, and God knows what else. So that is race. Okay, there is no such thing as race or pure race or anything. There's no such thing even as a pure species actually, but that's a different story. Now, what is ethnicity? Ethnicity is like a more granular perception of race. So if you look at the Balkan region, the Balkans in Europe, for example, this is the Balkan region. We'll go there. This region here, if you find Greece, then go northwest of Greece. Northwest. So this region here, Serbia, Bosnia Herzegovina, Croatia, Slovenia, Montenegro, Kosovo. Okay, we'll not discuss Kosovo, it's controversial. Albania, North Macedonia, and so on. Bulgaria. Okay, not Bulgaria, but all of this is the Balkans region. Okay. Now, I suppose the people of the Balkans consider themselves to have different ethnicities. Maybe they're all the white race, perhaps, but different ethnicities. I am not a Serb. I am a Kosovar. No, I am not Serb. I am Montenegrin. I am not Montenegrin. I am Bosnian. No, I'm not Bosniak. I'm Croatian. Croatian. You Croatians, I'm Slovenian. No, all of you are wrong. We, the Albanians, are number one, and so on. These are different ethnicities. Same people overall, the same race, so to say, white people, but different ethnicities. The Greece, in Greece, they have Greek ethnicity. We are not Balkans. No, we are not like you, and we are not Turks. The Turks are like, no, we're not Greeks. The Turks are extremely allergic to Greece because the Turks have Greek ancestry, don't they? But they consider themselves to have different ethnicity. We are the Turkic people. So ethnicity is more granular compared to race. If you look at the subcontinent, for example, if you disregard the Aryan Dravidian nonsense, then Indians are one ethnicity, which would include the Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, and there'll be some people who will disagree. No, they'll say, no, 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 everybody is different ethnicity. The Gujaratis are different ethnicity from the Assamese, the Bengalis are different ethnicity from the Odiyas. So whichever way, there is no definition. You see, you can make it as complicated as you want or as simple as you want. But the ethnicity is generally something that's based on nations and smaller cultural divisions compared to something as vast as a race. Okay. Prabhan Das says, big fan. Thank you, sir. Read two recent books. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. They were tremendously good. Oh, thank you so much, even more. My question is, can nuclear weapons be destroyed, making them unimpactful? Now, you all may ask me, how is this a historical question? Well, I'll bring history into this. Very simple. Have nuclear weapons been destroyed in the past? Let's say in the 20th century. If we discuss 20th century, we're discussing history now, right? Right. So, have nuclear weapons been destroyed in the past? I recently, maybe a week ago or so, I don't know when it was, I did an 8-hour live stream after which I forgot everything I did in the past. It wiped my memory clean. So I don't remember when I discussed this. But I recently kind of remembered that I spoke about the Cuban Missile Crisis. And I had mentioned at the time that during the Cuban Missile Crisis, which happened in 1962, the United States had about 25,000 nuclear warheads. How many? 25,000 nuclear warheads. How many did the USSR have? About three and a half thousand. Three and a half thousand nuclear warheads the USSR had at the time. Then, today, if you look at the balance, the Americans have 5,000 something, and the Russians have about 500 or 1,000 more. So today it is much lower than those thresholds. So what happened to those 25,000 nuclear warheads? Something was done to them, right? For example, in 19 excuse me, which year was it? Was it 1991? You had something called the START Treaty. START, Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty. Let's Google it. So I believe in 1985 there was a summit between Reagan, Gorbachev summit in Geneva. 85, yes, I know because I was there at the time. So this was a summit that happened in Geneva because they wanted a neutral venue. Mr. Gorbachev had just become the leader of Russia, and they had a summit over, if I recall correctly, 2 days. Over 2 days they had a summit, and they had some discussions where you had a whole bunch of minions present, and they had some discussions where you did not have anyone except for the two of them. And this was the beginning of the you could say détente between the two countries to some extent. And one of the consequences of this summit that they had was the 1991. It took 5-6 years. 1991 START Treaty. START One Treaty. The first treaty to require the reduction of strategic nuclear weapons was signed in 1991 by the US and the USSR, reducing each country's stockpile by a third. The treaty was a result of 9 years of negotiation. So the Gorbachev-Reagan summit in Geneva was part of that. And they established a comprehensive framework for the deep reductions in strategic arms. The START Treaty, if you look at the essence of the treaty, The treaty barred its signatories from deploying more than 6,000 nuclear warheads and a total of 1,600 ICBMs and bombers. Okay, so that was the START treaty. So the Americans went from 25,000 plus nuclear warheads to about 5,000 something today, if they are telling the truth. I suppose they are. So what happened to those nuclear weapons, those nuclear warheads? What happened to them? Obviously, they were dismantled, right? They were totally dismantled. So how do you dismantle a nuclear warhead? A nuclear warhead is essentially, it has a design, it has components. For example, you have the design, the Teller Ulam design. What is it? Let's see. That's a hydrogen bomb design, thermonuclear. Teller Ulam, yeah, Teller Ulam design. It's an implosion design. There is tritium. Is it? What was it? Boosted fission primary, and then there's a secondary fusion secondary. This is fissionable spark plug. So as you can see, you have fissile material that is arranged in a certain way and kept in specific parts of the warhead. All you have to do is open up the warhead and take out the fissile material very carefully and ensure it never comes in contact and never becomes a critical mass, or it never goes critical or supercritical. That's it. Then you can dismantle the whole thing and it becomes completely harmless. So it's absolutely feasible. It can be done. Okay, there you have it. Swapnil Mishra says, how did Robert Mugabe's policies towards Zimbabwe's white population affect the country's economy? And in what ways were his actions comparable to Idi Amin's treatment of foreigners in Uganda? Interesting comparison. Idi Amin, Robert Mugabe. Idi Amin, 1960s, 1970s. Robert Mugabe, late 80s, all the way to the 2010s. I think Robert Mugabe was deposed in 2017, 2018, 2019, around that time. Pretty recent. But he came to power. I mean, he was a big deal in the 1970s, but he became the president in 1980 something. Maybe 85, 87, around that time. Okay, so if you want to look at, I mean, if you want to see what the two gentlemen looked like, you have Robert Mugabe. Robert Mugabe. So that's Mr. Robert Mugabe. He was the president for a very long time. He's passed away now, I believe. And then you have the other great gentleman, Idi Amin. There is Mr. Idi Amin. So they both had kind of similar policies, but they had different ideologies. Idi Amin was not a communist. Robert Mugabe was a communist, socialist, whatever you want to call him. Uh, so what? So first of all, let's talk about Uganda and Idi Amin. What is Uganda? We go to Africa, yes, and we go to Eastern Africa, Lake Victoria. That's where we will find Entebbe and Uganda. So let's do it. Here is the map. Now we are in India, yes. So we go to the south of India, we cross the equator, we go into the Indian Ocean, then we go westwards and we reach East Africa. In East Africa, at the Horn of Africa, we have Somalia, we go south, we have Kenya, nice country. We go further south, Tanzania, and then we go northwest of Tanzania and east of Kenya, where you have Uganda, you have Kampala, you have Entebbe. So this is the country where Shri Idi Amin Dada, that's the country he ruled. And the terrible thing he did is that he expelled the Indians from Uganda. I think around 1971, 72. I think it was the year after the Bangladesh War, which makes it 1972. So it is in 1972 that Idi Amin expelled all Indians from Uganda. He said that these people are parasites. They have captured our entire economy. We need to liberate our economy from these parasites and give the jobs, give the businesses back to Africans. Why was he saying this? So in 1971, 72, Indians were about 1% of Uganda's population. Indians have had a presence in Eastern Africa for thousands of years. Okay, mainly people from Gujarat and Western India who were trading with the various kingdoms in East Africa. I'll not go into detail in that. So Uganda, you had about 1% Indian population. I don't know what the population of Uganda was at the time, but 1% of that was Indians. Very small number of Indians. But here's the deal. And by the way, Indians owned 90% of Uganda's businesses, and they paid 90% of Uganda's tax. So then the logic went is that these people have captured everything. They have deprived ordinary Ugandans of any opportunity. This 1% micro minuscule minority have taken over everything because they are so violent, right? Are Indians violent, really? So, but Indians own 90% of the businesses and paid 90% of the tax. So Idi Amin expelled Indians from Uganda. What was the consequence? So after expelling Indians from Uganda, he handed over all these businesses that were owned by Indians to native Ugandans, not Indians, not Indian origin people, but native Ugandans. And the consequence of that was that all the businesses crashed. The native Ugandans, for whatever reason, did not have the ability to run the businesses. So all the businesses failed. Uganda went into a recession. The economy crashed. Inflation rose. And Uganda's manufacturing sector disappeared because Indians were doing manufacturing. So it was a disaster for Uganda's economy. The Indians were not depriving the natives of business opportunities. The Indians were the only ones who knew how to run the businesses, and that's why they were running all the businesses. They were not Indians were not invaders who came with arms, right? They came peacefully and established themselves and created these industries and businesses. Indians created these industries and businesses. But after a few generations, nobody remembers that the Indians have created this. Now they will say that you stole it from us. So the Indians were expelled, and the Ugandan economy crashed. The Ugandan manufacturing sector crashed, and it's never really recovered from that. Afterwards, the Indians were brought back. They were allowed back, but I'm not sure if it made a huge difference after later on. So that's the example of Uganda. Okay, it was a disaster for the country, for its economy, for its manufacturing sector. Now, when Mr. Robert Mugabe became the dictator, so both are dictators. Okay, so Mr. Mugabe became dictator of Zimbabwe. Where is Zimbabwe? We look at Zimbabwe now. Yes. So we were looking at Uganda. Yes. So we were here on the northern shore of this lake that they call Lake Victoria, and there's a Lake Albert also. Anyway, you come back further south. You go south of Tanzania. You go south of Malawi, Mozambique, Zambia, and we have Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is a country that has a shared border with South Africa, and all Indians know where South Africa is. So now we can locate it. This is Zimbabwe. So Mr. Robert Mugabe became the dictator of Zimbabwe around 1980 something, 87 perhaps. And he ruled the country with an iron fist for until what, 2018, 2019, 2017, somewhere around that time. So 30, 40 years, whatever it is, 30 years. So now Zimbabwe used to be ruled by British origin white people. It was called Rhodesia. It was named after Cecil Rhodes, a notorious colonialist who did all kinds of horrific things to Africa. Anyway, the country was called Rhodesia. It was named after Cecil Rhodes, and eventually it became independent. And there was a gentleman called Mr. Banana, who was the leader of Zimbabwe before Mr. Mugabe. His name was Mr. Banana. I forget his first name, a very biblical name. Let's look it up, shall we? Let's have some fun, right? Let's not always be serious about learning. You should have fun. So, who was Robert Mugabe's predecessor? First of all, let's Google Robert Mugabe. Let's go to his Wikipedia entry and we will look into his predecessor. Who was his predecessor? It's a guy called Mr. Banana with a biblical name, preceded by not Muzoreva, preceded by not Chita Pochepo. Who was president of Zimbabwe? Who was the first president? Okay, so Mugabe was the first president. Emerson Mnangagwa. Okay, but who was before Robert Mugabe, leader of Zimbabwe before Mugabe. Let me just search for banana. Ah, okay. He was preceded by Canaan Banana. Canaan. That is, why is it a small image? Anyhow, so that is Mr. Banana, who was the gentleman who preceded Mr. Mugabe, and Mr. Mugabe becomes the president of Zimbabwe. And what he did was he disempowered the whites, and after the year, I think, 2000, he forcibly took away all the farmland from the white people and handed it over to black people. So even after Mr. Mugabe became the dictator, some white people remained in Zimbabwe, and they were primarily farmers. They owned land, large amounts of land, and they did farming. And they produced at least 40% of Zimbabwe's agricultural output, if not more. At least 40% is what I remember. Now their land is taken away. Mr. Mugabe encourages his party's supporters to go and forcibly take away the land of the white people and maybe do whatever you want with the families, whatever, sab chalta hai. So once this happens, all the farmland comes into the hands of native Zimbabweans, and they don't know how to farm, and that caused a disastrous recession in Zimbabwe. There was hyperinflation. The Zimbabwean paper currency became cheaper than paper itself. And eventually, I think they had to, as a stopgap measure, use the US dollar instead of the Zimbabwean dollar or something. And yeah, so it was a disaster once again. And Zimbabwe has never really recovered from that. Similarly, Uganda also never really recovered from expelling the Indians. So, pretty similar policies, but done in different ways. Both were pretty brutal, one towards the Indians, one towards the whites, and both caused significant disasters in these nations. Um, but when it comes to the Indians and the whites, you can't really compare the two. So the whites existed in Africa as a consequence of colonialism, which was brutal. The whites were invaders in Africa. The Indians were not invaders. The Indians had been trading in Africa. They had set up trade outposts in Africa going back centuries. Indians have had a presence in Africa, on the east coast of Africa for centuries, maybe thousands of years. Eastern Africa's cuisine is Indianized. The way they dress is Indianized. Even their language is Indianized. They eat samosas. They eat Gujarati style curries. They wear. The ladies wear dresses that look like saris that have patterns that are similar to patterns that were printed in that were uh, manufactured in Western India for centuries. So you can see the Indian influence there. Been, it's not, and this cultural influence would not exist if it had come through invasion. Through invasion, when a cultural influence exists, it generally takes the form of religion, because invaders they force the natives to adopt their religion, like the Portuguese did in India, in Goa. The French did in Pondicherry. The British tried in India. The British, and so on. Long stories, right? The Arabs did everywhere, but Indians didn't do that. The there's no black Hindus there, as far as I know. So you can't really compare the two as the same thing. The whites who were living in Zimbabwe, their ancestors were invaders. The Indians who are living in Uganda and all across Eastern Africa, they were never invaders. They came as traders, and they were allowed to settle down by the locals. And they became eventually part of the local communities. So that's the difference. Big difference there. Okay, Amisha says, if I was an everyday Indian living under the British Raj, the British occupation of India, how much contact uh, would I likely have had with the British people, the British occupiers? Well, that's a pretty interesting question that you ask here, and how do I figure it out is the question, right? So, let's ask Google once again. Let's go to our Google friend, to our friend Google, and we shall ask a simple question: How many British how many British occupiers were in India during during the peak of the occupation? Okay, what's it say? Oh, it finds my video. That's a different one. Okay, at its peak in 1947, the British population of in India was about 800,000 to 1 million, including civilians and their descendants. However, the occupying forces were much smaller, consisting of about 20,000 British civil and military personnel in 1921, who were responsible for the direct administration of the vast territory. So the civilians, if you include the civilians, it's about 1 million people. Okay. And if you only include the occupation forces, which is the civil and military personnel, it's 20,000. Um, so let's say you were living in India during the British occupation in 1947. Our population was 330 million roughly, undivided India. And the British were maximum 1 million. So it is 330 Indians to one British person. So and the British would be concentrated in the power centers. They will not be spread across the entire country. So if you are living in let's say a town or a village, you would perhaps never see a British person in your entire life, perhaps, if you were fortunate. But if you are living in a big city, if you are living in what was then called Bombay, which is now Mumbai, then you would see British people on a regular basis, I suppose, because there were lots of British in Mumbai. If you were living in Delhi or Kolkata, then also you would see British people from time to time, I suppose. That sort of thing. So the British population was at its peak about 800,000 to 1 million. That's 1947. So depending on where you were, you could potentially spend your entire life without seeing a British person if you were fortunate. Yeah, that's the kind of yeah. So they had a pretty small number of occupiers actually, just 20,000 British civil and military personnel. Makes you question a lot of things, and it tells you how well the British understood the nature of power. Right. Nirvana Shanks says, how was Tenochtitlan, built on water with canals and floating gardens, different from European cities at the time? Okay, what is Tenochtitlan? I will show you Tenochtitlan. Yes, I will. We have to go to maps. So we go to map, we zoom out from Africa, and I shall take you to the city of Tenochtitlan. So we go westwards, we go westwards, we go westwards, we cross the Atlantic. Now we go northwards into Central America. And now we zoom into what's called Mexico. And we zoom in. And we zoom in. And we zoom in. This here is Tenochtitlan. It's now called Mexico City. It used to be called Tenochtitlan. And the city was built inside a lake. The lake was called Lake Texcoco. Texcoco. This was the seat of the Triple Alliance, the Aztec Triple Alliance. So the city was built inside a lake. You can't see the lake today. The Spaniards have wiped the lake out, right? And this basilica of whatever, it is built on a destroyed temple. Okay, that's what the Spaniards do. You will see similar things happening in India also. Wherever you have the old Portuguese or French churches, they'll be built on destroyed temples. Anyhow, so this is Mexico City. It used to be called Tenochtitlan before the Spanish destruction of the Aztec Empire. Now, so how was this city of Tenochtitlan different from European cities of the time? So Tenochtitlan was, like I said, built inside a lake. The lake wasn't super deep, and the city was built as like islands, kind of floating islands inside the lake. And instead of having water, I mean, having roads, you had waterways. So the city had canals for transportation. You could transport humans, even animals, on boats in the canals. So today, if you want to travel in any major Indian city, you would take, I don't know, two-wheeler, three-wheeler, four-wheeler, whatever. If you don't have one of your own, you can hire a taxi or whatever. Call one of the services. You can do that. So in Tenochtitlan, you could, I suppose, call a boatwala. I would like to go to so place, market, and come back. How much? That sort of thing. And you also had causeways. So you could, so that connected the city to the mainland, which was not the lake. And in the middle of the lake, where you had the city, you also had farmland. So they had created these artificial islands, kind of floating islands, where you had farms. It was a city like no other. It was a very powerful. It was a seat of an empire. So that's very different from European cities. European cities around 1500 were generally constructed around forts and castles. So Europe was this tribal region where you had tribal warfare that went on for centuries, going back to the pre-Christian era. Um, so all the major cities of Europe, they started as castles and fortifications. So you would have some kind of chieftain, maybe a small king or small chieftain, who would construct a, a fort or a castle with a moat around it, and you will have like 100, 200 soldiers inside. And because that place is a place of protection, which will give you protection from neighboring raiders, that's why a small settlement will come around it, and they will offer services to the king, and the king will offer protection. And that's how the settlements slowly grow. And that's how you have cities like Paris and so on that became big cities eventually. And they grew, these cities like Paris, etc., they grew organically. Even London initially, they grew organically, they grew haphazardly, they were not planned cities. And that's why they were congested. They would not be very hygienic. uh, they used to they used to have a class of people called the gong farmers, who would be allowed inside the city only at night to take the shit off the roads, because the Europeans used to dump the shit on the roads, the excreta in the night, from buckets onto the streets of the city. So the city used to stink immensely, and there was a certain caste of Europeans who were called the gonflemur, or the gong farmers, who were untouchables and who would be allowed only inside the city at night to collect the excrement, and they have to disappear before morning because they are untouchable. They are dirty, and their children could only do this work. They could not aspire to any other life. So that's the kind of caste system you had in Europe. So cities in Europe were disgustingly dirty, stinky, extremely congested. In a city like Rome, you had something called the Cloaca Maxima, which was the great sewer, and you had smaller sewers. So Rome at least had sewers, but other European cities later on did not have sewage systems. Uh, Tenochtitlan was not like that. Everything was well organized, and so overall, it was very different, right? A unique city, and that's something the Spaniards completely smashed. And they renamed it to Mexico City, and they destroyed the lake, which is why there is no lake there today. Okay, Shub says, how did dhoti become uncool in India? How can we bring it back? Dhoti, it became uncool like everything else because of the British occupation, and because today Western dress is the norm in India. Western dress is cool. You wear designer clothing, Western clothing, you're cool. You wear the humble dhoti, or you wear a sari with a petticoat and blouse, you're so uncool. You're uncool, right? How do you make it cool? Well, have designer dhotis, have mix and match your dresses with dhotis. You can wear a polo shirt and sneakers with dhoti, but not just your khadi wali dhoti. You can have a silk dhoti, designer dhoti. Why not? Right? I mean, you can bring it back. It's a very comfortable piece of clothing, and it's tailor made for the Indian climate. The jeans aren't tailor made for the Indian climate, even though we all wear them, right? The dhotis are, but dhotis are uncool. That's why nobody wants to wear them. But dhotis are really good. They're perfect for the Indian climate, and uh, so historically, it's not like all Indians wore dhotis. The Kushans, when they conquered northern India, they brought in a different kind of attire, what's now called salwar kameez. The Kushans used to wear the salwar kameez kind of thing. They used to wear boots and trousers, which have now become the salwar. But even that is light and airy, right? It's not like tight. Um, so the dhoti can be made cool again. Let me give you an example of an ancient historical dhoti from my Instagram page, for instance. Right? Check this out. This is something I put on Instagram. What? Yeah, 2024 is last year. This is a coin. It's an ancient coin. It's and this is the coin of the Persian ruler Wahbars from about 200 to 164 BC, roughly. And it depicts the king slaying a Yavana soldier, a Greek soldier. And the question I've asked over here is, what garment is the king wearing below the waist? What is it called today? Is this still worn anywhere? And if you look at the garment, yeah, let's bigify this. If you look at the garment, it is clearly a dhoti. It's a Persian king wearing a dhoti in battle. Isn't that interesting? Right? So it was cool in Persia uh, 2000 years ago. So it's something that we can bring back anytime if we want to, but we don't think it is cool today. It is not cool. No. Feminist Slayer says, who was Ragnar Lothbrok? And why is this significant in Viking history? Well, Ragnar Lothbrok is very famous today because they made a whole series out of around around his life story, right? Vikings, and they also brought in Rollo into the series. So Ragnar Lothbrok is considered to be a semi-legendary king. Apparently, historians say that his historicity is not entirely confirmed. Well, I'm kind of perplexed. It is not. So he was a king. He was a chieftain in Scandinavia. Scandinavia is the Nordic countries, Sweden, Denmark, all that. Mainly Denmark, Norway, Sweden, that area. So he was probably Danish or Norwegian, somewhere around there. Yep. And he is someone who perhaps would have been one of the uh, principal actors in the beginning of the Viking Age, which is the beginning of the Viking invasions of England. It would be probably he or one of his contemporaries would have launched that one of the first raids that happened on Lindisfarne, where all these where the monks were slaughtered and the monasteries, gold and valuables were carted back to Scandinavia. Um, so Ragnar Lothbrok was a king. He eventually became a king. I suppose, I'm not sure if he was born into nobility or royalty, but he became a king, and he apparently had multiple wives and lots of children, lots of sons, and he launched multiple invasions of England. And he was eventually captured by King Aella of Northumbria, and he was executed in a very strange manner. He was thrown into a pit that was full of snakes. So the snakes bit him, and he died. And so the king of Northumbria, King Ella, he killed Ragnar, and the word reached Scandinavia. And Ragnar had a whole bunch of sons. So his sons obviously were not very pleased that their father was killed by an English king. So they brought together an army and they invaded England. And that is called the Great Heathen Invasion or the Great Viking Invasion, which happened in the 9th century. And it really happened. That is not legendary. And the English records say that there was an invasion by Vikings, a great invasion of heathens, unwashed non-Christians, pagans, polytheists. And the Viking sagas say that this was an invasion done by the sons of Ragnar Lothbrok to take revenge for vengeance for the death of their father. And they conquered almost all of England, apart from what King Alfred the Great, whatever territory he commanded, he was able to safeguard that, but everything else came under Dane law, the law of the Danes. So Ragnar Lothbrok was very significant, and he had multiple sons who went on to be legendary kings in their own right, like Bjorn Ironside and Ivar the Boneless, Hvitserk, and what snake in the eye, some and so on. And he was known to have multiple wives at various points in his life. Right. Aditya Kumar says, why did the raiding of monasteries by the Northmen, the Vikings, why did it not lead to the development of a faction of warrior monks who could defend the said monasteries? Well, in a society, you have division of labor. We are familiar with that. Do you expect the teachers? See, for example, we know what happened in Nalanda. The barbarian Turks came and burned Nalanda. Why were they able to do this? Because they had defeated the kings who protected Nalanda. So, in a civilized society like we used to be, you had division of labor. The monks, the teachers, the gurus, who were Brahmins in the monastery, they would not do any fighting. Why should they do fighting? The kings would do the fighting. The kings were the defenders of the realm. They would have armies. It was their job. So in an advanced society, people specialize. In a tribe, you generalize. You should know everything. If required, you should be able to fight. If required, you should be able to do something else. You should be able to hunt and so on. But in a civilized, advanced civilized society, you specialize and you stick to only that. So even England was kind of advanced. It was no longer tribal. And it was a Christian society. And in Christianity, the monks they're supposed to be cloistered in the cloisters and pray and dedicate their life to the service of his Lord, his holiness, Shri Jesus Christ, I suppose. Right? So monks did not fight. The kings who protected the monasteries, they were supposed to take care of the protection of the monasteries. So there was a deal. Of course, you have exceptions. Of course, you have exceptions. We have Bodhidharma, who was an Indian monk, who went to China and he had to teach them how to fight. So it is said that he was actually a Kshatriya. He was not a Brahmin, right? He was the son of some king in southern India. Apparently, that's what the Chinese say. So he came from some southern India. He was the son. He was a prince. A prince is taught how to fight. A prince knows how to fight, right? And that's why he was able to teach the monks of Shaolin Temple how to fight. And that fighting style is now called Kung Fu. In Christianity, also you have exceptions. If you read the legend of Robin Hood, which originates in the 1200 1300s, around that time in England, you had this monk, correct? Friar Tuck. Friar Tuck is a character. Obviously this could just be entirely legendary, but legends need to have some semblance to reality, otherwise they don't become popular. So in the legend of Robin Hood, you have one of his followers, or one of his close associates, who is called Friar Tuck, who is a monk, who's a friar, and he's fond of drinking, he's fond of eating a lot, and he's fond of fighting. He's a good fighter. He's a pretty fat man, but strong man. So you have exceptions everywhere, but overall, monks were not expected to fight. Monks were expected to pray, and the king was supposed to protect the monks, and didn't work. Sometimes doesn't work. You see. Okay. Ajinkya Pawar says, what's your opinion about the theory that states the painter has actually escaped from Germany to somewhere in South America along with a few Nazi leaders? Look, it is known that a few Nazi leaders were indeed present in, for example, Argentina, right? Adolf Eichmann, where was he discovered? Israel, the Mossad discovered Adolf Eichmann in Buenos Aires. And they sent a team of Mossad agents to Buenos Aires. They abducted Adolf Eichmann, drugged him, and sent him back to Israel on a flight. And he was tried in Israel and he was executed. That's Adolf Eichmann, who was a very high-ranking Nazi official. The Israelis apparently even discovered Dr. Mengele in Argentina. But they had a choice. They had to make a choice. It's either Eichmann or Mengele. I think Eichmann was a higher ranking guy. That's why they decided to go with Eichmann. And it's not just like you only had Adolf Eichmann and Mengele in Argentina. You had many other former Nazis who had escaped Europe and settled in Argentina. Today, you will find many Argentinian people who speak Spanish, who have got first names like Carlos and Gustavo, but they have German last names, which is very interesting. So it's possible the painter himself may have made the journey across the Atlantic. It's possible. Because when it comes to the painter, have we ever found his body? Do we have any actual evidence that he died? The newspapers shouted the painter is dead, but Was there any evidence? It is said that the Soviets took his body and disposed of it or whatever. Why would they not parade it? He was their arch enemy. He launched operation, what was it called? Barbarossa, right? He was the great evil who bled so many Russians, who caused so much destruction and death to Russia. Why will the Soviets not show his body? So there's the possibility that the painter may actually have escaped. The possibility exists, but do we have proof? We don't. Okay? Proof doesn't exist, possibility exists. Let us take some questions from the comments. I still have more questions that I can go through, but it will take a long time. I will take questions from the comments for a while and then we shall end this. Right, okay. What? Yes, Barbarossa. Shri Vladimir Putin says it is Barbarossa. We get it. And why are you guys taking super chats today? Why? This is not a super chat session. Okay, I will finish the super chats quickly. See, please, this is not a super chat question. I'm sure you did not realize it. I should have been more clear, and the fault is mine. Let's quickly go through super chats, but only if it is about history. I will not take non-history questions. What is the first one? Once again, let me. Yeah. How might Indian history have looked if naval dominance had been prioritized the way it was in Europe, the way it was with the Cholas and the Satavahanas? Well, that's a completely hypothetical question. See, we were navally dominant even during the Maratha period, right? Uh, we prioritized naval dominance for the longest time. If you look at the Harappan period, we had gigantic docks. The port at Lothal and the port at Dholavira, they have harbors that compare favorably with the port in Vishakhapatnam, where you can dock an aircraft carrier. And even during the Gupta period, for example, when Samudragupta conquered the entire subcontinent, especially by conquering the southern parts of India, his conquest of southern India was a two-pronged conquest. It was a land-based conquest and also a conquest in parallel at sea. He had a powerful navy, but we will not be taught any of this in our NCERT textbooks. That's the problem. He had a powerful navy. The Marathas had a powerful navy. Our empires always prioritized the navy. They always had powerful navies, but we are not taught this. We had the great Maratha Admiral Sri Kanoji Angre, who won so many, who never lost a battle, I believe, right? A naval battle. So we had that, but we are not taught these things. That's the problem. Godliness says caste reservation work. We are talking history, sir, today. Please, sir, please. We talk history today. We'll not take and anyway, don't talk about internal matters. I talk about history, science, geopolitics. I don't talk about caste issues today. I don't talk about Waqf board. I don't talk about these things. Internal politics, yeah, that's something I am not. I don't deal in that. Sorry, sir. We talk about history. What is next? Kaushal says causes for the fall of Roman Republic includes one, increase in inequality between the slave-holding class and common people, increasing use of political violence. I see the same thing in America. Agree. The call for the cause for the fall of the Roman Republic does include all of these things. Yes, and even the fall of the Roman Empire. See, the cause for the fall of any system is the weakening of the system. You may have inequality, but as long as the system is strong, nothing can be done about it. When the system becomes weak, that's when the inequality becomes weaponized. You may have a nation where you have 1% people who rule 99% people who are slaves. We just took a look at an example where you had 20,000 British occupiers who ruled over 330 million Indians. Isn't that shocking inequality? But as long as they have the power, they wield the power in the right way, the Indians can't do a thing. So what you are saying is true. You are seeing rising inequality in America. No question about it. No question. You're also seeing an increase in political violence. And the Charlie Kirk thing is like something all Indians are obsessed about for some reason right now. But whatever. It's an indicator of the rise in political violence. No question. But as long as the American system remains strong and the politicians have the power in their hands, which is the armed forces, the nuclear option, and the police force, then there's nothing the common Americans can do about it. It's only if they lose their control over these tools that America could uh, be on the way the same way the Roman Republic went. Arush Mahajan, thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Arush says, "Well, thank you, Arush. First of all, we met in Pune Hayat. Okay, it's good then. I'm sure if I meet you again, I'll be able to remember that. So good to hear from you, sir. I hope you're doing well." Abhiday Singh says, in Shiv Puran, there's a story where Daksha gets his 27 daughters married to Chandra or Soma, that is the moon, and he used to spend most time with Rohini. Now we know that the elliptical course of the moon, we know the constellation where the moon transits is exactly the same one. It's interesting. It's interesting. You see, many of these stories have in India. In India, look, we our ancient our ancestors did not expect everyone to understand science. Let's say you are a shipbuilder. Let's say you are a cloth merchant. Let's say you are a metallurgist who is smelting steel. Let's say you're into some other business. Everybody was in some business, right? India was a fully industrialized civilization. So you had people who were in all these occupations and they did not have the time or the inclination to know science. So how do you bring scientific concepts into common understanding? By by crafting these beautiful tales, right? So that's how the astronomical facts become woven into stories you teach your children. So children grow up learning these stories, and then one day when they realize there's an astronomical uh, fact that matches it, they will immediately be able to match the story with the astronomical fact. So that's how you can bring the scientific world into the common people's lives, by creating these interesting stories and tales. And if these include divinities, like the moon is a divinity and so on, then it makes it even more powerful. So that is how we used to have, we used to transmit knowledge, education, and so on. And today, it's very different. It was so easy earlier, right? If it was done this way. Himanshu says Rahul Gandhi will speak to Trump. All right, sir. We are discussing history today, sir. We are discussing history today, and I will not discuss Indian politics. I stay out of Indian politics, even if it is, yeah. So, okay. Mohit Bhatt says, was Thutmose 2, 3 of ancient Egypt a good emperor? How much did the Egyptian civilization I don't remember this particular king, man. Thutmose the third. I have the book right here, but it's been a long time since I read it, and there are so many kings and queens of the Egyptian empire. Okay, let me do a book recommendation. Give me a second. I will be right back in like 10 seconds. Give me a second, okay? And we are right back. So, if you want the answer, I don't remember right now. Thutmose the third. But if you want the answer, this is a great book. The Rise and the Fall of Ancient Egypt by Toby Wilkinson. And I am pretty sure that I'll be able to find the answer in this one. It's been a while since I read through the book, so I don't remember. See, that's the deal. People ask me, let me use this to illustrate a different point. People ask me all the time, how do you retain everything you read? Well, here's an example of me not retaining everything I read. It's impossible to retain everything you read. You have to give yourself permission to forget things. You're not supposed to be a hard drive that stores facts and data. You should understand causality, cause and effect. How did things happen? But specific facts, the life history of a specific king somewhere, it's okay to forget. It's okay to forget. So, Mohit, but I'm sorry, I don't remember this right now. It's been a long time since I read this part of history. But here's a great book recommendation for you, Mohit, and for anybody else who's interested in Egypt. This is a great book. All right, let's move on. Let's go to the next question. EKS Baga says, are Russian demographics as bad as China? No. I don't think Russia's TFR is as you're talking about TFR. I hope not demographics. uh, China's TFR. The last time I saw it, total fertility rate was I think 1.1 or 1.2, which is horrific. And Russia's TFR is not that bad. Uh, okay, let's quickly see if we can find information on Google. Um, Russia Russia TFR 2025. Okay, Russia's TFR is about 1.41 or 1.42. Okay, this is a very brief. I'm not sure if it's the exact correct number, but yeah, this is what AI is telling us. Google's AI. I'm not doing a proper detailed fact check here. Just a very quick check, fact check. Let's see China's TFR. China TFR 2025. What is it? It's 1.02. 1.02, 0.9. My goodness, it is worse than last time I saw. So as you can see, Russia's TFR is nothing as bad as China's. China is in a bad situation. Oof. Wow. Ramachandra Veda, thank you, sir. No question, but all right. Thank you so much. Digvijay says, I am more left liberal, so often differ. That's fine. But your views push me to think deeper. We grow by learning across perspectives. I even use Ask Abhijit, this is my gym podcast. Well, thank you so much, sir. I am really honored. It's okay to be whatever you are. Look, whatever we believe, whatever worldview we have, it is caused by the kind of life we've had, the kind of upbringing we had, the kind of teachers we had, the kind of textbooks we had, the kind of parents we had, the kind of family we were born in, the kind of friends we had. All of this comes together and it influences the way we see the world. So it's okay to be whoever you are. It's not like I will only speak. It's not like we should only speak to people who have exactly the same thoughts and same beliefs as us. We should talk to everyone, and it is perfectly fine to have different opinions. I'll tell you something. In the 2000s, I used to consider myself to be liberal. Why did I consider myself to be liberal? Because I enjoyed meeting people of different backgrounds. There are some people who only want to have friends who speak the same language and have the exact same food choice, and everything this should be the same. I only want people who are exactly like me. I'm the exact opposite. I enjoy having friends who are from very diverse backgrounds, different countries, different cultures, different backgrounds, different whatever, different languages, even different religions. I don't care. It gives you, it makes the world more interesting if you have friends like that. So I always enjoyed having friends from different parts of the world, and that's why I considered myself to be liberal, because I had a very open mind. I still have a very open mind. Then later on, I got to know that the term liberal has been captured by the left. That whatever the left is, that is liberal, and everyone else is right winger. From that perspective, then I would be a right winger, because I'm not a Marxist, I'm not a leftist, I'm not a socialist, I'm not a communist. So that automatically makes me right. So the truth is, I am liberal. I respect everyone as long as they respect me. I enjoy very diverse company. But I am not a lefty. Okay, but that's okay. That's okay. So my point is, look, it's okay to have different opinions. It doesn't mean that we have to be enemies or we have to fight. We can be friends. As long as I'll be happy to be friends with anybody as long as they're not anti my civilization and my country. That's it. You can be of whatever religion, you can speak whatever language, you can even eat whatever food you want. I don't care. As long as you are not actively harming my culture, my civilization, and my country, I'm perfectly fine. But that's all. Right, okay, next. Vijay says, to be clear, I'm not saying I change my views. I respect the intellect helps me avoid echo chambers and test my own ideas. Perfectly fine. I'm not asking you to change your views. Just have an open mind and at least hear everyone out. You should be exposed to all kinds of ideas, and then you can choose whether you want to agree or disagree with them. That's entirely your choice. And it's glad that you have this. I'm glad to see that you have this open mind. So good to see that, sir. Good to see that. All right. Galliver says Trump's breaking. Okay, this is geopolitics. We're discussing geopolitics tomorrow. Sir, please, today we only discuss history. Otherwise, it's no longer a history live stream, and I'm letting my audience down who have all come to watch geopolitics. I mean, sorry, history, right? Please, sir, let us stick to history today. Um, Rahul says, not a question but a suggestion. There are some trolls who frequent the live chat and dirty the discussion. Having moderators will help. I have at least one moderator. Well, I will remind the moderator to do a better job. But anyway, thank you for pointing this out. I appreciate that. And it is noted. Your point is noted. And the last question for today is by Galluer. Why was the massacred Pequot misnomered in Moby Dick? Anglo-Saxon arrogance or innocent forgivable folly like Arbeit macht frei. Moby Dick. Moby Dick is a fascinating story. What's the first sentence in the book? One of the most epic opening lines. Call me Ishmael. And that's the narrator. Now, the problem is that I read Moby Dick and I was fascinated with the story, with the whole time period and that milieu. But the last time I read Moby Dick was when I was like 15 years old. That's been a long time. I don't remember the story today. I remember it was fascinating. It was all to do with whaling. You have Captain Ahab, you have Queequeg, right? And so on. But I don't remember the story. I remember the white whale. Captain Ahab was obsessed with the white whale. So I don't remember right now. Once again, you see, I don't retain everything. It's been so long. So long. So yeah, I'm sorry. I won't be able to answer this because I don't remember the story anymore. And reading that book again, it's a huge time investment. That's a big book. And I remember it's not an easy read. It's a fascinating read, but not an easy read. And it would take me some time to read it today. So I'm sure I'll not have the time right now to read it. So right now I can't answer your question. But anyway, thank you so much for asking the question. And yeah. Okay, folks, that's it. That's it. I'm going to have to end this now. This is a regular live stream. It's not one of those 8-hour live streams that I can do every weekend. So let's end this now. And I shall see you tomorrow, 8 p.m. India time. And tomorrow we shall talk about geopolitics. And I'll take all the questions, as many as possible. Mainly from the super chat, but everything is welcome. All right, people, thank you so much. Guten Nacht, Herr Shrivastava. And good night, good day to everybody, all my friends. Guitar you know what? It's been a long time since I played the guitar in any seriousness. I have 3 guitars hanging there. They need new strings. They still have the strings. And I have my amp over here, the electric guitar amplifier. It's been a long time. If I play right now, I will sound terrible. So maybe I should practice for a while before I play the guitar. But yeah, I used to be a good musician. I am a lapsed musician. I used to be a really good guitarist. Anyway, maybe sometime in the future I'll bring out my guitar and do the intro with the guitar. All right, people. I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care. And keep raising your standards. Never forget that. Bye-bye.